Good evening, boys and girls. Good evening. And you adults, too. Everybody that needs to, come on and get a seat. We're going to start our VBS program tonight. We're glad you all are here. If you don't know, my name is Jethro, and I am better known as the father-in-law of Moses. And I've got a lot to say tonight, and so I have written it down or had it written down for me so that I can correctly try to tell you what I want to tell you. We're glad you're here. Let's get right into it and get things going. That Moses, now he is one great God of man of God, excuse me, and I am so blessed that he married my daughter, Zipporah. I'm here tonight to tell you a little bit about Moses' journey through the desert with a huge group of God's people, the Israelites. Those Israelites, well, they've been something else. Let me begin by asking you a question. Do you ever fuss, whine, or complain around the house? Some of you do. Well, I do too sometimes. And I'm afraid that we're all guilty of complaining because we are so spoiled to comforts and conveniences that we are blessed with in our great country. We like things done in a hurry, whether it's a drive-through for fast food or standing in line in Walmart, we're always in a hurry. Well, today we're going to find out that the Israelites have gotten into a very bad habit of complaining. Poor Moses, think of him, he's the leader, he's one man with all these people, and he has to listen to possibly up to 3 million people, whether they're happy or they're complaining. He gets to hear them gripe and fuss over and over again as he leads them through the wilderness. We're going to hear a few of their complaints, but first let's review a bit of what we learned here at VBS last year, because some of you were not here and because some of you may have possibly forgotten. Last year we learned how Moses was chosen by God to go to the Egyptian king Pharaoh and demand that the Pharaoh let God's people go, the Israelites, leave the Egyptian slavery they had been under for hundreds of years. Pharaoh is going to have no part of it in letting them go until God, I should say, through Moses, pronounced 10 harsh plagues on the Egyptians, showing God's power, and that's God with a capital G, over the Egyptian gods, which were what we would use lowercase g. After all the horrible plagues, Pharaoh finally let the people go. Our adventures last summer ended with the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea. With God's great power and provision, the sea divided, allowing Moses and the Israelites to go through the sea on dry ground. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, Pharaoh had changed his mind about letting the children of Israel go, and he had his army chase the Israelites, but that only resulted in destruction of Pharaoh's army. They got swallowed up by the Red Sea. So now the Israelites are on the other side of the sea, and the people are rejoicing in their deliverance and in their destruction of their enemy. This is where our lesson will pick up tonight. The Israelites were so happy, and they are praising God for his wonderful deliverance from Egyptian slavery. While we are wandering in this desert, God is going to provide all of their needs, but we're going to find that most of the time, it seems that they really don't trust God is with them. Even after witnessing so many mighty works that God has done right in front of them so far, they keep forgetting that he is still with them every step of the way. Here's a map of their journey. And if you can look up on the map, number 1 shows where and when they left Egypt. If you'll follow the purple line down a little bit to number 3, and this is where they have been across the sea. Today we are visiting the part of the Israelites' route through the Sinai Peninsula. We're going to mark on our map with 3 red arrows. The first stop will be Marah. The second stop, or in Marah, this is where the scholars believe Marah to be. The second stop will be Elim, and the third stop is a place, Rephidim, and it's marked with that third arrow. If you remember, if you've read the story, the Bible account of what God did for Moses and the children of Israel, you will know much about the journey already, and Moses and the Israelites made through the desert. You will remember that God is leading the Israelites all the time. As you can see on the screen, during the day, there was a pillar of cloud that led the people. All they had to do is follow the cloud. They wouldn't get lost. When the cloud moves, the people follow. If the cloud stays there, they stay till the cloud moves. Seems like a simple way to know they're following God. Don't you wish it was that obvious for us today on how we should do? But then at night, you couldn't see the cloud, so God provided a pillar of fire which gives them light. Whether they're traveling or camping, the light always lights up in the darkness. This is a marvelous example we see of God's providing for the Israelites in the wilderness. Now we know that in order to live, we must have water to drink, correct? And many of us today, I'm kind of big on lemonade right now. I don't drink enough water, but you have to have water. It's the lifeblood of filling our body. Moses leads the Israelites away from the Red Sea and into the desert, and they traveled for 3 days in the land. Guess what? They haven't found any water. So what do you think the people do? They complain. Like what they always do, they began to complain to Moses, saying, "Now what will we drink? What will we drink?" They came to a place called Marah. There's water at Marah. This is very exciting, except the water was so bitter they couldn't drink it. The word Marah means bitter, so that is how the place got its name. On this next side, you'll see that Moses, who called to the Lord about the problem, and the Lord shows him a piece of wood. And the Lord tells him to take that piece of wood and to put it in the water, and sure enough, the water became good to drink. Why would putting a piece of water in wood make it better? The only logical reason is because that's what God wanted Moses to do, to show the children of Israel how he could change things and also how he was taking care of them, the power of God. This is an example of Moses obeying God in the simplest form. Moses could have said, "Why should I pick up this wood and throw it in the water? Just fix the water." He didn't do that. He didn't question God. He picked up the wood and he threw it in. Very obedient. God changes the water with his power. Now it tastes good. Next, the people travel to Elim. At Elim, there are 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. Raise your hand if you've ever seen a palm tree. Quite a few of you have. How many have ever climbed a palm tree? I have not. We got one that did. So in Elim, where all these palm trees are and 12 springs of water, God provides the water once again. Let's hope they're grateful to God and don't complain about anything here. The people make their camp near the water and stay for some time. When the Israelites leave Elim, they travel to the western Sinai desert between Elim and Mount Sinai. Then they all began complaining to Moses again. They say, "It would have been better if God had just killed us in the land of Egypt. At least we had plenty to eat. We had all the food we needed. But now you have brought us out here in the desert and will make us all die from hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will cause food to fall from the sky. This food will be for you all to eat. Every day the people should go out and gather food. And they need for that day. I will do this to see if they will do what I tell them. Every day the people will gather only enough food for one day." How many of us have to go out in the yard and pick up our food every day and go in and eat it, and then go out again the next day to get food and eat it? Not many of us live like that. If you've got a garden, you might go out and pick vegetables in the garden, but there's other things that we can eat. The manna provided from God was all they had to eat. But on Friday, Again, they should only pick up what they needed for one day, except for on Friday. And on Friday, when the people prepared their food, they were to gather enough for 2 days, for Saturday and Sunday. Moses tells the people, "You've been complaining about the Lord, and he has heard you. So tomorrow morning you will see the glory of the Lord. You've been complaining about myself and Aaron." I bet Moses was already tired of that, don't you? Maybe now we can have a little rest. It's easy for us to see how ungrateful the Israelites are, isn't it? They seem to have forgotten about the blood of the lamb that kept their firstborn safe during the last plague in Egypt. They seem to have forgotten that the lamb's blood on the doorpost is what delivered them out of the bondage of Egyptian slavery. Question: do you ever forget about the blood of Jesus, your Passover lamb, and what Jesus' blood did for us? He died for us so that we could be delivered from the slavery of sin. On our next side, we can see that the people are out there looking at the food that's on the ground the next day. God promised food from the sky, and when the dew is gone, something like thin flakes of frost is on the ground. When the Israelites see it, they ask each other, "What is this?" because they've never seen anything like it before. So Moses tells them, "This is the food the Lord has provided for you to eat." The Lord says each of you should gather what you need, a basket for everyone in your family, every day. The people call the food manna, which means, what is it? What is it? The people call the food manna again, so the people began to gather the manna. Some people, however, gather a large amount, and some people gather a little. Everyone knows just what they need for their family for one day. Except. Moses says don't save any food to eat to the next day. But guess what? Some of those didn't obey what Moses said that God had told them to do, and they saved food for the next day. What would it be like if we took that food we'd saved yesterday and opened it up, and in there we found that it was stinking, and that the people who did this, they found that it had worms in it. And you can see from the slide, it did not look very good at all. On Friday, the people gathered twice as much food, 2 baskets for every person. This is because there would be no manna on the Sabbath day. It is the day of rest. They are to save part of their Friday gathering to eat on the Sabbath, 2 days, Friday and Saturday. So the people saved part of the food as Moses has commanded. On that day, none of it spoiled. When they came out the next morning and got some of that food, it was just as good as it was the day before. No spoils, no worms. It was good. Moses tells the people, God heard your complaining, which is against him, not us. What can we do? We do only what he tells us to do. So your complaints are really against God. Moses and Aaron found themselves in a very tough position. Then Moses says to Aaron, "Tell all the Israelites to come together before the Lord, because he has heard their complaints." So Aaron speaks to all the Israelites. While Aaron was talking to him, the people turn and look into the desert. They see the glory of the Lord appear in a cloud. And the Lord says to Moses, "I have heard the complaints of the Israelites, so tell them, tonight you will eat meat." Remember, they've just been eating this manna. "And in the morning you will have all the bread you want. Then you will know you can trust the Lord your God." We can see in this picture the mountain. We can see them standing there, however, and we can also see quail on the ground. God keeps his promise. That evening, flocks of quail come and fill the camp. They now have meat as well as bread. Even though the people don't seem to trust God is going to take care of their needs, he always provided more than they need. I find that true in my life today too. Though I seem to have little sometimes, I have more than I need. I have all that I need if I just trust in God. The Israelites leave the Sinai desert. They camp in a place called Rephidim. But again, there is no water for the people to drink. So they again turn against Moses and start arguing with him. They say, "Give us water to drink." Moses says to them, "Why have you turned against me? Why are you testing the Lord?" But the people were very thirsty, so they continue complaining to Moses. They say, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Did you bring us out here so that we, our children, and our cattle could all die without water?" So once again, we see Moses on his knees, pleading with God, talking to God, and saying, "What can I do with these people? They are ready to kill me." God says to Moses, "I will stand before you here on the rock. Take your staff," the staff that Moses always had to walk with, "and strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." Sure enough, that happened. Moses did as God said, and God made the water come out of the rock. Moses does just as God commands, and the water came out for them to drink. Moses names the place Massah, which means testing, because the people are testing God. He also names it Meribah, which means strife, because the people have turned against Moses. Once again, God provides water when the people think there is none. God also provides Israelites with a victory. When their enemies attack at Rephidim, the Amalekites came to make war with the Israelites. Moses says to Joshua, "Choose some men and go fight the Amalekites tomorrow. I will stand on the top of the hill and watch you, and I will be holding my staff of God in my hands." And you can see from the slide, he was holding that staff up. And Joshua obeys Moses and goes to fight the Amalekites the next day. At the same time, Moses, Aaron, and a man named Hur go to the top of the hill. Anytime Moses was able to hold the staff up in the air, the victory would be the Israelites. When it began to fall, they would start losing the battle. So Aaron and Hur held it up with them. They put a rock under Moses for him to sit on. Then Aaron and Hur hold Moses' hands in the air, one on either side. They hold his hands up until the sun goes down, so Joshua and his men defeat the Amalekites in this battle. Remember before we started this lesson tonight, how loud it was in here and how seemingly out of control it was, even though you were just doing what we as people naturally do, talking and visiting to everybody. But no one would have been able to hear the lesson had y'all not sat down and started looking up here and listening. Do you know what chaos is then? Imagine on the first day of school, for some of you that go to school, what it would be like if nobody listened to the teacher, nobody obeyed the rules, and there was absolute chaos. No name of the teachers, no name of the students, no name of who came, no homework, no books, no learning. And by the way, it's important to learn. What if we didn't have that? Now, if there's no structure, we have disorder and confusion. But what happens if we go without chaos? Israel has become in somewhat of a chaos. The Israelites are a huge group of people. There are over 600,000 men, so with wives and children, there may be as many as 3 million people. That would be chaos if people didn't follow God's rules and Moses' leadership. Moses is the leader, and every day he is spending hours trying to settle all the disputes and disagreements these people have among themselves. Any of y'all have brothers and sisters? Raise your hand if you got a brother or sister. Do you ever argue with your brother and sister? It's not good, is it? But who has to intervene? Either mom or dad or somebody comes in. You can put your hands down now. Either mom or dad or somebody comes in and says, "Let's settle this argument. Let's make this right." This is where I come into the story again. Remember, I am Moses' father-in-law. He married my daughter. Who remembers my name? I started with that at the start of the lesson. What's my name? Anybody? Tell me. Jethro, that's right. One day I came from Midian and brought Moses' wife and their 2 sons. While I'm there, I see this long line of people waiting for help with their problems. Moses, like a parent, had to solve all the arguments, make all the decisions for any disputes there were, and it was taking more and more and more of his time. So, while hoping to talk to Moses, I am overwhelmed for Moses, understanding his predicament. So I advise him that he needs help, as he will soon grow tired and exhausted. He chooses wise men to be his helpers. They need to be men who can be trusted and truly give good advice and make wise decisions. They will serve as judges or counselors to help solve any problems they have. This is how God preserves the Israelites from chaos. Remember the slide that we had of chaos? Look at the calm that we have here now. God takes all care of all the Israelites' needs. He loves them, provides for them, even though they gripe and complain sometimes and even rebel against him. But guess what? God loves us too. And that's something we need to remember, is that God truly loves us. He provides for us all that we need. Let's try being more trusting of his great promises. And let's be more thankful for all the many blessings he gives to us every day. We get blessings. The best way you can show your trust in God at this age is to obey your parents that he has given you. Get in the habit of thanking God for all he does for you. Pray to God in thanks. You also should be showing your thankfulness to God and appreciate your parents, your grandparents, and other adults who are trying to help you become what God wants you to be, his children. On another way we can show our gratefulness is to stop complaining. Do we ever stop complaining? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. We've got a song, and I'm going to read it instead of singing it because of the time that we're under. And so instead of singing this song, I'm going to read it out loud, and that way some of you who can't read can hear it. The name of the song is God Will Take Care of You. Be not dismayed, whate'er betide, God will take care of you. Beneath of wings of love abide, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. So what should we do? Well, do not worry is the first thing we shouldn't do. If we trust in God, he will provide for us. God took care of the Israelites, and he takes care of all of you today. Listen to what Jesus says in Matthew 6, somewhat paraphrased, I might add. So I tell you, don't worry about the things you need to live, what you will eat, drink, or wear. Life is more important than food, and the body more important than what you put on it. Look at the birds in the sky. They don't plant, they don't harvest, or save food in barns, but your heavenly Father feeds them. How many of y'all seen birds in the grass eating, or in the trees eating different things, or picking up a worm? God feeds the birds. It's there. They don't worry about them. So don't worry about what you are worth much more than they are. Then Jesus added, we worry about our clothes. He said, and why do you worry about your clothes? Look at the wild flowers in the field. See how they grow? They don't worry or make clothes for themselves. But I tell you that even Solomon, the great and rich king, was not dressed as beautifully as one of these flowers. If God makes what grows in the field to be beautiful, what do you think he will do for you? God cares enough to make it beautiful for you. Surely he will do much more for you. So boys and girls, I'm advising you a couple things tonight, as I advised Moses to make some changes. I'm advising you to not be like the Israelites, worrying and saying, what will we eat or what will we drink, or what most people wear or whatever. What you should want most is to be close to God. You should want to be a part of the church and to serve the Lord in the way you can. Then God will give you all these things you need. In closing, I'd like to give you some more advice. And here are 3 things that I want you to remember about this lesson from the Bible. Number 1, we should trust God without complaining. Number 2, God will provide all your needs. And number 3, we should be grateful for all He provides. So, thank God for what you have and trust God for what you need. That ends our lesson tonight. Come back tomorrow night and learn more about what happens next as Moses leads the Israelites through the desert. There'll be another speaker tomorrow night. Let's hope you all are back here to hear who it is. I believe at this time we're ready to be dismissed and go to our classes. Teachers, lead them the way. And helpers, thank you all for being here.
All right, adults, as the kids are filing out, I want to encourage everyone to come towards the middle and come towards the front. Come on, we can do it. I believe in every one of you. Grab that pillow if there's a pillow. Come on, come forward. All right, as everyone's coming through and filing into a closer seat, it is my honor and privilege to introduce our guest speaker, not only for tonight, but for the week of Vacation Bible School. Coming back to us again from last year, we have a returning speaker, Matthew Martin, who is the preaching minister from the North Heights Church of Christ in Batesville. We're so glad that he's here and excited to get to hear him present lessons geared around our theme for Vacation Bible School this week. Thank you very much, Matt.
It's probably a better way to do that. All right, hang on. Let me just test this very quickly. Did that work? Nope. Did that work? Yes. Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you very much to the Mountain Home family. I appreciate very much the invitation and the opportunity to be here to talk to you again. If you were here last year, then here I am again. I'll make a promise to you that I will try to speak slowly. I get very excited, and I tend to talk fast when I get excited, but have a little patience with me, and I will do my best to speak slow enough for everyone to follow all that we have to cover. I also ask that you will trust me. I have to say that at the outset because a lot of the material, we're going to cover everything that you're supposed to cover for this Vacation Bible School. I'm going to take you from the Red Sea to the fall of the walls of Jericho is the time span that I'm supposed to cover, which is a big chunk of text. So I'm going to get you there, but it's not going to be exactly the same way that the kids are following their lesson and the way that their material's laid out. So we'll get through. Maybe you'll be halfway through this lesson tonight, and you'll think, I don't know if he knows his assignment. I don't think he knows what he's doing. I want you just to trust me. I'm going to get you to Jericho. We're going to watch those walls fall down on Wednesday night. I promise you that. Just give me some trust. I'll get you there. I have some lessons that I want to teach you from God's Word as it relates to that journey that the Israelite nation will take to get to the Promised Land. And then one thing I'll ask of you. I'm going to be patient with this microphone that keeps trying to pop out of my ear. I ask you to be patient with me, and I'm going to trust you to trust me, but I'll ask you to please give me your time, not just tonight, but come back tomorrow night and Tuesday night and Wednesday night so you can hear the fullness of this material. Because if you just are here tonight, and I'm thankful that you are, and you don't come back, if you can't come back, I understand, but if you just don't come back, you're only going to be there having just crossed the Red Sea, because that's all we're doing tonight. We're just crossing the Red Sea tonight. I was here last year, as I said, and when I was here last year, the assignment was take us from Egypt and walk us through the Exodus and the plagues and the calling of Moses and everything involved in that. And you can take us to the Red Sea. And the exact instructions that I was given was you can take us to the Red Sea, but you're not allowed to cross it. So I pitched the opportunity to come back, and I was afforded the opportunity to come back, and I'm not going to just run right by that Red Sea. I wanted to cross it last year, so we're crossing the Red Sea tonight. So we're going to do that this evening, and then we're going to cover the material as is laid out before us. But to do that, to cross that Red Sea and to cover that wandering period of the Israelite history, we're not just going to open our Bibles to Exodus. We're not just going to open our Bibles to Numbers or to Deuteronomy and then later to Joshua. We're not just going to do that and have me just get up here and just recite the same account that we've already heard. We just heard it here a moment ago. Jethro gave us the whole thing. We're not just going to just cover that ground just by summarizing it. We could do that. We could summarize it. 45 minutes, we could cover quite a bit of territory just summarizing the text. I don't want to just summarize it. I want to use this text to learn some lessons because, as we know from Romans 15:4, those things that were written in the past were written for our learning, so that we, by that reading, through the patience and comfort of the Scriptures, might have hope. We learn from studying our Old Testaments. We learn from reading about and learning from the accounts that we find in Exodus and Numbers and Leviticus and Deuteronomy. We learn from reading those texts lessons for ourselves. So I think the best way to cover this material without it feeling like we're just giving you a Cliff's Notes of the text is to use the Bible as its own best commentary, to use the Bible as its own best explainer. So to study this account tonight, open your Bibles not to Exodus, but to Psalm 105. Open your Bibles to the 105th Psalm, a psalm which covers the material that relates to the text that we're going to study tonight. I feel it is important, since it has been a year since we last covered this material, I feel it's important to have a summary, to catch up on where we left off, to have a reminder of where we are as a segue to where we're going. So with that in mind, let's consider the previously on. Open your Bibles to Psalm 105. Let's read the first 5 verses just to begin with. The psalmist, the poet, says, "Oh, give thanks unto the Lord and call upon His name. Make known His deeds among the people. Sing unto Him, sing psalms unto Him, talk of all His wondrous works. Give glory in His name, let the heart of them rejoice that seek the Lord. Seek the Lord and His strength, seek His face forevermore. Remember His marvelous works that He has done, His wonders and the judgments of His mouth." We'll stay here in Psalm 105. There are a few more verses to consider, but just here is the introduction. The poet tells us, give thanks to God. Why? Because He is good and worthy of our thanksgiving. Not just once a year, not just once a week, but all the time should we have opportunity. Do we have opportunity? And all the time should we take those opportunities to give thanks to God. How do we give thanks to God? There are many ways to do that. You can sing to Him. You can glory in Him. You can seek His counsel and seek Him out to get closer to Him. But this one that we're going to focus on is there in verse number 5. We give thanks to Him by remembering Him. We think back on all the good He has done for us, and we find ourselves just naturally being thankful. That's the segue to our Exodus account. Stay in Psalm 105, though, and jump down to verse number 26. Hang on. Did I do this wrong? Sorry. Psalm 105. Maybe this battery is no good. Let me turn it off. This is the universal thing. Turn it off and turn it back on. Oh, there it is. All right. Hope that's not an omen. Look at verse 26. He sent, this is God, sent Moses his servant and Aaron whom he has chosen. Just to pause there for a second. Israel's time in bondage led to Moses' ascension. That's what we covered last year, his ascension in Egypt. Eventually, it led to his finding God at Mount Sinai. And through that, along with Aaron, the people found a leader who was meek and patient enough to deal with them and to deal with all the problems that they all arose. They all dealt with those problems. They all faced those problems together. But the children of Israel usually handled those problems terribly. Moses was a leader, not just in his footsteps, not just as the person in front, but by his character and by his example. They looked at him and they saw how they should be acting, but oftentimes were not. In fact, it's interesting to consider how it was Moses and Aaron who led the people. Moses as the intermediary between them and God by leadership. Aaron as the intermediary between them and God in terms of worship, because Aaron would become high priest. And yet here today, we look back and we learn from that, but we don't rely on Moses as our middleman to us and God. We don't rely on Aaron as our middleman between us and God. We have Jesus Christ who embodies both of those in one go. Verse 27, Psalm 105. They showed his signs, Moses and Aaron, showed God's signs among the people and the wonders in the land of Ham. The land of Ham is Egypt. So now here we have the Exodus account kind of baked into the text of Psalm 105. And the idea of it is to consider what God has done for you, and in so considering it, being thankful. This is the psalmist writing to his people. His direct ancestors were these people who were in Egypt, who saw these wonders. The Egyptians who felt those wonders, or as they would call them, plagues, that would force them to let the Israelites go. Do you think the Egyptians were thankful for those plagues? No, they were not. Verse 28, God sent darkness and made it dark, and they rebelled not against his word. Everyone, do you think the Egyptians were thankful for the plague of darkness that snuffed out the light so completely and so totally that even if you were an Egyptian trying to light a candle in your house, it still would not give light? You think they were thankful for that? No, they were not. Verse 29, he turned their waters into blood and he slew their fish. Fish in particular, a critical component to the economy and to the livelihood of the Egyptians, not only to the national health of them, to say nothing of that. God murdered and killed those fish in their land to punish them. God turned their waterways for such a desert area in general. Egypt relied on that waterway for fertility, for fertile ground, and yet God turned that waterway to blood. You think they were thankful for that? No, they were not. Verse 30, their land brought forth frogs in abundance in the chambers of their kings. Do you think they thanked God when frogs invaded the land en masse? Were they thankful for such a disgusting plague? No, they were not. Verse 31, good. He spoke, and there came divers sorts of flies and lice all in their coast. Do you think they thanked God for the swarm of flies and lice that obscured the visibility, that constantly was touching them and stinging them and pressing against them and being all around them? Do you think they thanked God for such a disgusting plague? No, they did not. 32 and 33, he gave them hail for rain and flaming fire in their land. He smote their vines and also their fig trees and broke the trees of their coast. Do you think they thanked God as they looked up and saw the weather turn violent against them? That it rained not water droplets, but balls of ice, that when they hit the ground, they exploded into balls of fire. You think they thanked God for such a destructive plague? No, they did not. Verse 34 and 35. He spoke, and the locusts came, and the caterpillars without number, and they all did eat the herbs of the land and devoured the fruit of the ground after the hailfire rained down and destroyed what they had. What was left over, the few random stalks here and there of crops that were still remaining, they were consumed by the locusts. Do you think they thanked God when they saw the last of their crops be eaten by a swarm of wild and consuming insects? No, they did not, and they were not thankful. Verse 36, he smote also the firstborn in their land, the chief of all their strength, their pride, their joy, their future. Do you think they thanked God when they woke up in the morning and they saw they had been literally decimated? No, they were not thankful. 37, he, God, brought them forth. Also, that's the Israelites, brought them forth with silver and gold, and there was not one feeble person among their tribes. Do you think Israel was thankful? Yes, they were. They didn't show it for long. It'll pass. It'll fade. It'll be only there for a minute. But Israel was thankful. When the hailfire came, Israel was thankful. When the frogs invaded, Israel was thankful. This is looking back on it with kind of a rosy kind of view. As you go to the actual Exodus account, Israelites complaining even throughout that account. But generally speaking, when they look back on it, they were thankful for the hailfire. They were thankful for the plagues. They were thankful as they looked back on it for the lice and for the flies and for everything else that consumed the land. They were thankful for the plague and the pestilence. They were thankful even for the death of the firstborn, because those things enacted the will of God to save them from Egypt. Was Egypt thankful? No, not a bit. And as Israel left, and they left looting the houses of the Egyptians, taking their Egyptian silver and their Egyptian gold and consuming it for themselves and leaving with their gold and silver, were they thankful to watch them go? Absolutely they were. The Pharaoh may not have been, but the rank and file, the average Joe, the typical citizen whose house was destroyed, whose crops were destroyed, you think they were thankful to watch those people go, to be rid of them and rid of their God who was so destructive against them? You think they were thankful? Oh, yes, they were. Israel also was thankful. Verse 38 and following. Egypt was glad when they departed, for the fear of them fell upon them. 39. God spread a cloud for a covering to His people, and a pillar of fire He gave to guide them by the night. Israel was thankful that God led them out. Israel's thankful that God led them, period. Because once you cross that Red Sea, which we're going to get to in a second, once you cross that Red Sea, it's just a wide open countryside. And all you have is if Moses didn't have that pillar of fire, if Moses didn't have that cloud, if the people didn't have Moses leading them, if they just had instructions left by Moses, I'll meet you at the mountain. Okay, guys, we got to get to the mountain. There's mountains all over. It's either desert or it's mountains. Which mountain? There's only the one they're supposed to go to. You think they were thankful that when it was daytime there was a cloud guiding them, and at night a pillar of fire that they could not miss guiding them? Yes, they were thankful. Did they complain? Absolutely. But in general, when they look back, they had reason to be thankful, is the psalmist's point. Verse 40, the people asked, and He brought forth quails, and He satisfied them with the bread of heaven, that being the manna bread. Were they thankful for that? Yes. They didn't have to grossly labor. They didn't have to do great work. They didn't have to grind meal into powder and make flour and make bread. They didn't have to go hunting. It was just provided for them, literally rain from the sky for them. Were they thankful? Yes, God provided. Who wouldn't be? 41. He opened the rock and the waters gushed out. They ran into dry places like a river. When the people needed water and the people cried and begged and they whined and complained, yes, I know. I don't want to paint too rosy a picture of them here. The psalmist is looking back in kind of a rosy way. But when the people needed water and they cried and complained and begged for water, did God leave them to starve? No, God opened a rock. A thing which when you look at you would think would not produce anything but more rock. And yet when Moses spoke to the rock in Exodus, water came from the rock in abundance, so much so that they all were able to drink and enjoy, because God is a provider. Be even more thankful, you Christians, that when Jesus opens Himself, a fountain of living water pours out. John 4:14, verse 42 and following, because God remembered His holy promise and Abraham His servant. If you ever read the Exodus account and you think, why does God stick with this people? There will actually come a point in Numbers 14 where God will almost ask Himself the same question. He'll almost say, let's just be done with this people, Moses. You and me, let's get back together. Let's start over with a whole new people. It'll be you as the heir to the whole new lineage. We'll just wipe out the Israelites. And Moses has to say, God, if you destroy this people, the Egyptians will all make fun of you, because they had them for hundreds of years. You couldn't keep them for a month and a half. And God had to say, you're right, I'm not going to destroy them. I want to, but I'm not going to destroy them. That's the summary. This here is the reality. I have made a promise to Abraham. I'm not going to break it. It is through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Israel, and his sons, that will come the heir of salvation. He made a holy promise, and they should be thankful for that. They should be thankful God made a promise to Abraham, because they didn't give God any good reason to keep it. 43. And so God brought forth His people with joy. God brought His chosen ones with gladness. That was their joy and their gladness. Because there were many times along the way that they were not joyful and they were not glad, and they did not make God joyful and they did not make God glad, certainly not Moses either. And yet in general, as we look back on it, as the psalmist encourages us to do, he says, look back on your history and see that all God has done for you, in spite of your whining, in spite of your complaining, in spite of your unworthiness. See all that God has done for you and be ye thankful. Psalm 105:44. God gave them lands of the heathen, and they inherited the labor of the people, which we'll cover on Wednesday night when they conquer Jericho and everything that follows. That first generation, though, they're not going to touch that land. As you know, and as we'll cover later this week, they get to the edge of it. They get to the precipice of the promised land. They send in the scouts, and they come back and they say, there's giants. We'll never do it. We'll never take it. How could we ever possibly? How could the God who split a giant sea in half ever handle Goliath and those like him? And so they don't believe. And because they don't believe, they wander. And they wander until they're dead. They don't wander because they're lost. They know exactly where they are. They can see the promised land. And they have to just wander to the left of it or to the right of it on your map. Because God says you're not allowed to touch it. You're not allowed to go in there because you weren't grateful. But then the next generation goes in. You weren't faithful or grateful. The next generation goes in and they take it like that. And now they get to look back here in Psalm 105. And they get to see all that God had done for them. And they get to see all the reasons that God has given and continues to give them to be thankful. And 2, verse 45, observe his statutes and keep his laws. Praise ye the Lord. You have reason to praise the Lord because when you look back in your past, as Israel could look back in hers, you have reason to be thankful. So there's kind of your catch-up with some teases for what's to come. I like using the psalm here because it gives us a different perspective. But you saw it, you read it with me. That's Psalm 105, but is that not the Exodus account? We have direct reference. And then going into Leviticus and early Numbers, it's all there. So we were able to look at that same account, the same material we covered last year in a nutshell, by looking at it from the perspective of the psalmist viewpoint of it. But now let's go to Exodus chapter 14. I'm going to give you a second to turn back there. And then once you do, put your thumb there, or put your ribbon there, or put your bookmark there if you're using a digital version of it, or actual bookmark if you're using a book. So get there, and then as soon as you get to Exodus 14, you're going to look it down and say, oh, I know where we are. We're at the Red Sea. We're about to cross the Red Sea. Yes, we are. And we will make allusion to Exodus 14. We'll even read a couple of verses from Exodus 14. But to study the crossing of the Red Sea, to see that moment of truth when those people, those griping, complaining people, before they have a chance to look back and be grateful, those immediate ones, to see them at the precipice of their salvation, to see them at the front door of God's victory. They are there, but to them it's not a front door. To them it is not a bridge to cross. To them it is a wall that is impenetrable. To them it is a giant wall of water that is insurmountable, that is impassable, that is impossible. And God's going to move that wall. God's going to split that wall of water in two. But we can't just run by that. We can't just say, and then God opened the Red Sea. We can't just say, and then they crossed the Red Sea. We need to appreciate the anxiety and the faithlessness of the Israelites as they stood at the front of that Red Sea, knowing within themselves, we can't cross that Red Sea. We're all going to die. And what God did with that and how they learned from that, because that's what we learn. So to learn that lesson, not only from Exodus 14, we're also going to open our Bibles to Psalm 77, a psalm which covers the Red Sea crossing and teaches us the lesson of being thankful. So go over to Psalm 77 and put your bookmark there. We'll go back and forth between those two. I'll give you a second because I know I told you to go to Exodus. Now you're going to Psalm. Don't worry, you're about to go back to Exodus. Here's what you're going to learn. When I am troubled, what do I do? When Israel is standing at the edge of the Red Sea, they are not happy. They are not joyful. They are no longer thinking back to all God has done for them. Now they are panicked. They are nervous. They are freaking out. They look in front of them. There's a wall of water they can't cross. They look behind them. They see the dust being kicked up by Pharaoh's chariots coming for them, coming to take them back. It's over for them. They are caught between a rock and a wet place, and they know we cannot cross. We are doomed. What do we do? I know. Let's all panic. When I'm troubled, when I'm tempted to panic as they were then, what do I do? It's what they should have done here. So now let's go to Exodus 14 and read it before we go to Psalm 77 and learn from it. Let's read Exodus 14, the first 12 verses. Exodus 14, starting in verse 1, the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, quote, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they may turn and encamp before Pihahiroth, between Migdol and over the sea, over against Baal-Zephon, before it shall encamp by the sea. For Pharaoh will say to the children of Israel, or of the children of Israel rather, they are entangled in the land, and the wilderness has shut them in, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart, God promises, that he will follow after them, and I will be honored upon Pharaoh and upon all that his host is, his army, that the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. And so this they went and did. They went and they camped, and here they are, coming to the Red Sea, Keep going in Exodus 14, verse 5. And it was told the king of Egypt that the people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people. And they said, Why have we done this? We've let the Israelites go from serving us. And he made ready his chariot and took his people with him. He took 600 chosen chariots and all the chariots of Egypt and all the captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued after the children of Israel. And the children of Israel went up with a high hand. They went, they think, as we're about to see, to their doom, but it won't be. Verse 9. But the Egyptians pursued after them, and all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, they overtook them encamping by the sea, besides Pihahiroth and before Baal-zephon. And when Pharaoh drew near, and the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. The Egyptians weren't, the Israelites were. They looked back and they saw they're close, they're getting closer, and they don't look happy to see us. They were very afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord, and they said to Moses, verse 11, Because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us here to die in the wilderness? Why have you done this with us and carried us forth out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, when we said, Leave us alone so we can serve the Egyptians? It would be better for us to serve the Egyptians than for us to die in the wilderness. The Israelites are troubled. What should you do when you are troubled? What you should do is what they did in the wrong way. You should reach out to God. You should call on God to help you. Now, they called on God to criticize. They called on God to attack. They called on God to mock. They called on God to wag a finger at, yet they still called on God. So half point, half credit. When you are anxious, when you are worried, when you are facing your proverbial Red Sea and you turn around to find some alternate way and you see, no, there's no other way. There's a Red Sea or bust, which is the Egyptian army. What do? You can't go that way. You can't go that way. You have to call up that way. You call out to God. Now, let's go to Psalm 77, verse number 1 starting. Psalm 77. Just take your Exodus, move it over to the middle of your Bible. We'll come back to Exodus in a second. Call out to God. Psalm 77, 1. I cried unto God with my voice, even unto God with my voice, and he gave ear unto me. Many psalms start like this. Many psalms feature the inspired poet, whomever it may be. Usually it's David, sometimes it's not. Crying out to God in a moment of distress. Every now and then you'll get one where the psalmist is in a happy mood. Usually the psalmist is panicking about something. Usually it's David on the run from someone trying to kill him today, and he finally finds a moment's peace, finally finds a moment to rest, a moment to put out his pen and paper. And what does he write? God, why have you forsaken me? Psalm 22, verse 1. Why can't you hear me? Why aren't you listening? Why don't you care that I'm about to die? The rest of Psalm 22 until about halfway through it. I feel like I'm being crucified, basically, is what Psalm 22 is. It's a prophecy of the Messiah spoken from the anxiety of David. Here in Psalm 77, similar story. The psalmist is crying out in his distress. The psalmist is crying out in his anguish. He's crying out saying, God, please hear me. Why won't you listen to me? Verse 2, In the day of my trouble I sought the Lord. My sore ran in the night and ceased not. My soul refused to be comforted. No matter what might have been said to me, no matter how I might have wanted to feel, I could not get through the night feeling okay. But I know God is going to be with me, because in the past God has been with me. I remembered God. Verse 3. And I was troubled, I complained, and my spirit was overwhelmed. Have you ever felt like your spirit, your attitude, your emotion, your inner man, all of the essence of you that's not physical, has been overwhelmed? You can sometimes spot a person going through anxiety, but you can only spot it because it is so full up on the inside that it's bursting out of them on the outside. Their body language can't help but show it. But usually, before that point, they're just as anxious, they're just still hiding it well. And you can't always tell a person who is anxious. You can sometimes see it when it bubbles over, but usually an anxious person, a worried person, a fretting person, they hold it inside. They don't show it too often out and about. They keep it within. They bottle it up. They store it within them because anxiety is an internal thing. My spirit is overwhelmed. I feel, to quote the Master in his great invitation, heavy laden, and I need rest. I need someone who can take my burdens from me, the psalmist says. Verse 4, You hold my eyes waking. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. Have you ever been so heavy laden, so full of anxiety, so full of cares and concerns and worries and troubles, and when someone spots it and sees it, and they say, what's going on? They want to help. and you don't have the words, you can't tell them, your words fail you, psalmist is here too. This was thousands of years ago. People are people. The psalmist is doing the same thing. I stay up all night thinking about it. My eyes open, waking constantly. Can't sleep. What do I do when I am troubled? I look up and I speak. What does the psalmist do? He cries out to God. Hear me, O God. I need you. Look up and speak. What do you do when you're troubled? Remember God's past salvation. God has saved you in the past. God has helped you in the past. He hasn't gone anywhere. He'll help you again. Psalm 77, verse 5. I consider the days of old and the years of ancient times. I recall in my remembrance the song in the night. I commune with my own heart, and my spirit makes a diligent search. I start retrospectively remembering. I go back in my mind and start recalling all the times when God has been with me, when God has been with my ancestors, and I lean on those times. 7 through 9 of Psalm 77. Will the Lord cast off forever? Will He be favorable no more? Is His mercy clean gone forever? Does His promise fail forevermore? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has He in His anger shut up His tender mercies? Has God just forgotten about me? Has God just not listened to me anymore? Has He tuned me out? Does that not sound like, with less sarcasm and insult, what the Israelites were saying at the Red Sea? Have you brought us out here just to kill us? And what is the psalmist saying? Has God just forgotten about me? He's not trying to be as disrespectful to God as the Israelites were, his forebears were at the Red Sea. But it comes from the same place. It comes from that same sense of yearning and needing God and not feeling instantly satisfied, not feeling immediately gratified. When my children were younger, as all children do, they get scared in the middle of the night, have a bad dream, something like that. And so we'll go in there. When I was a brand new parent, I hadn't learned all the lessons. I still haven't learned them all. But one thing that I would say to my children, which I don't really say anymore without elaborating, well, the first thing I would say to them is, well, you just need to pray about it. And that's it. I would just leave it at that. Ignorance. Young parent ignorance. I'd say to my little child, you just need to pray about it, and you'll feel better. So then he gets up a few hours later. It's still the middle of the night. It's like 3 a.m. It didn't work. There's still thunder rumbling. He's still wide awake. I said the prayers. It didn't work because I left him with the impression that it's magic. That it's magic words. You say your magic words, and magically the thunder will stop. No. I mean, sometimes God stops the storm. Usually, God doesn't calm the storm. Usually, God calms you, right? Usually, God calms you. Usually stops you from worrying. And how does He do that? Yes, prayer is the way to unlock that, but it's not by saying magic words. It's by pouring out your heart and finding the therapeutic counsel that comes with a dialogue with God and trusting in the Lord by looking back on all the times that God got you through the previous storms and God got you through the previous trials and knowing that God will get you through the next one because He's the same God. He's not getting any weaker. He's not getting any older. He doesn't get forgetful. He didn't drop you off His Rolodex. He still knows who you are. If He helped you yesterday, why wouldn't He help you today? And He'll help you tomorrow too. And when you have that in mind, suddenly the storm doesn't matter. Have you ever had the child get up in the middle of the night and come to your bedside saying, I'm scared? You can't stop the storm, but you can open your bed, you can let them slide in, you can drop the covers over them, and then within 5 minutes they're sound asleep. The same storm is still outside, but they don't care anymore because their loving parent gave them comfort. That's what God offers. It's not magic. It's a comfort that comes from knowing. It's a comfort that comes from understanding my God has, is, and will be there for me. Psalm 77, keep going. Verse 10 through 13. I said all these things in my infirmity, but I will remember the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the works of the Lord. I will remember the wonders of old. I will meditate, say my dear, on all of your work and talk of all of your doings. Your way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Who is so great a God as our God? I will reflect on what God has done, and I will marvel at Him. Let that comfort me. 14 and 15, you are the God that does wonders, who has declared your strength among the people. You have with your arm redeemed your people, the sons of Jacob and Joseph. Now we come to, as we'll get to, the Exodus. But let's pause here in Psalm 77. Let's go back to Exodus 14. And let's pick it up with the children of Israel, which the formatting, I apologize, I brought different formats. It doesn't quite look right here, but I'll read it to you. Exodus 14, verses 10 through 12. When the Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid, and the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord, and they said, because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you done this to us, to carry us out of Egypt? Isn't this what we told you when we were in Egypt? When we said, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians. It'd be better for us to die in Egypt serving them than to die out here in the wilderness. Did you just bring us out here to kill us? Yeah, that's it. That was God's big elaborate plan. That was God's big scheme all the way from Abraham. I got this great idea, Abraham. It's going to involve you and your descendants. The plan is to take them into Egyptian custody and then bring them out just like 30 yards and then let them die there. No, obviously, that's not the plan. But when you're panicked, when you're anxious, when you're nervous, you tend to cry out things that don't make any sense. And so they start crying out. They start screaming out. Well, you're right to cry out. It's what they were crying out that was wrong. When I am anxious, when I am troubled, I need to reach out to God. I need to look up and speak. When I am troubled, anxious, restless, worried, in the middle of a storm, I need to remember God's past salvation. I need to think back and rest. And finally, when I am troubled, I rely on God for victory. Let's go back to Psalm 77, verse 16 to start with. The waters saw you, God, and the waters were afraid. The depths also were troubled. It doesn't seem like it yet, but we're moving into the psalmist's rendition of the Red Sea crossing. And the way the psalmist poetically puts it, when the Red Sea saw that God was with Israel, the Red Sea got anxious. The Red Sea itself got troubled. Because if it was any other god, if any other random Egyptian went up there with one of his Egyptian gods and said, in the name of my Egyptian god, I part you, the Red Sea would have laughed. Because your Egyptian gods can't do squat. But Israel may be freaking out, but Moses is standing in front of them. He's not panicking. And the Red Sea, we anthropomorphize it. The Red Sea can see Moses, and the Red Sea can see Moses' God, and the Red Sea starts quaking. The Red Sea starts shaking because he knows they serve a God that can split me in two. The Red Sea saw you, God, and was afraid. 17 and 18, the clouds poured out water, the sky sends out a sound. Your arrows also go out abroad. The voice of your thunder was in the heavens. The lightnings lighted the world. The earth trembles and shakes. That's the God we're dealing with here. A God who speaks and it thunders. A God who flicks his finger and lightning blasts. A God who can blink and who can make the lights go out in all the world. That's the God we're dealing with here. And when God says split, you're about to split. 19 and 20, your way is in the sea and your path is in the great waters. Your footsteps are not known. You lead the people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. You lead the people like a shepherd leads a flock of sheep through Moses and Aaron. And where are you leading them, God? Your way is through the sea. Your way is into the sea, but no one's going to get a bit wet. Your way is in the sea. Moses says, this is our salvation. This is not our doom. The Red Sea is not our death. The Red Sea is our ticket out of here. The Red Sea is about to split wide open, and we're going to cross it and not even get a bit wet. The Red Sea is the way forward. The way is in the sea. The path is in the great waters. Let's see that in Exodus chapter 14, verses 13 and 14. Moses said to the people, this is right after they said, did you bring us out here to kill us? We're doomed, obviously. Impassable, impossible. We're doomed. And Moses says, fear not. Stop being so troubled. Stop being so anxious. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. You're panicking. You're worried. No panicked person has ever stood calmly. Moses says, calm down, stand still, and see what God's about to do for you. The Lord shall fight for you, and you will hold your peace. You will sit there, and you will like it. You will sit there. You have to talk to them like children, because they're not called the children of Israel for nothing. That's what they act like, a bunch of babies. You're going to sit there, you're going to be quiet, and you're going to watch what God is going to do for you. He is going to split this water in two. Jump down to verse 21 and 22. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on the right, and a wall to them on the left. You know what it used to be? It used to be a wall in front of them, and now it's a wall on either side of them, and now they've got a conduit to salvation that God has provided for them. You stand back and watch God do something He's never done before. He's going to do it again. As an encore, He's going to split the Jordan for the next ones. But you get to watch it first. You faithless bunch of whining, spoiled, rotten brats, you watch what God's going to do for you. You ever split a sea? I'm talking to you, you anxious people. I'm talking to me, anxious person. I get worried and I think, how can I solve this problem? Who said I have to solve the problem? Whose problem was the Red Sea? The Israelites would say, this is our problem. We can't solve it. We're doomed. No, it's not your problem, Israel. Listen, did you make the Red Sea? Who made the Red Sea? Who carved the Red Sea with his divine finger? God did. It's his problem. Let him deal with it. What are you panicking for? What are you worried about? I'm asking you. Don't answer. Just think to yourself. It's your problem. You think. It's not. But you think it is. You would define it as your problem. I'm worried about this. I have this XYZ problem. Okay. Now you take that problem and you bundle it up really tight. Make sure it's really well organized so you know it's exactly, here's where it begins and here's where it ends. Here's my problem. It's not your problem. What's your problem? What do you think it is? My problem is this job. Did you create that job? Did you make that job? Well, my problem is my child. Did you make that child? I mean, you had a hand in it, but God breathes life into all things. Did you make that thing? Well, my problem is this health problem. Did you make that problem? Did you make that cancer? Did you make that disease? Did you make this world that produced that with thanks to sin that came into this world? But did you make the world itself? Did you make the world? Now, who made the world in 6 days? Somebody yell his name out. God did. It's his problem. Let him deal with it. Who do you think has a better track record of dealing with problems? He's got the whole world in his hands. What have you got? You've got a little box that you think is your problem. It's not your problem. It's God's problem. You try and split the Red Sea. Is that too big? What's this lake over here called? Right over here? North? Yeah. You try and split that one. That's a little smaller. Maybe that'd be easier. That's still too big? What about a bathtub? What about a bathtub? Can you split a bathtub? Still too big? Let's take a cookie tray. Got like a lip that's about an inch tall, right? Take your little cookie tray. Fill it with water. Can you split that? Let's fill that up with water, and then you try and open up your hands and split that. You still can't even split that. It is impossible for you. It is impassable for you. But God can split a sea like it's nothing. God split seas just on a random Tuesday, and it means nothing to him because he made it all. Trust God. You're anxious about what? It's his problem, not yours. He made the world in 6 days. Let him deal with it. God can do the impossible for breakfast. When I am troubled, what do I need to do? I need to reach out to God. Look up and speak. When I am troubled, what do I need to do? I need to remember God's past salvation. He helped me before. Why wouldn't he help me again? He hasn't gone anywhere. Think back and trust. When I am troubled, I need to rely on God for victory. I need to stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Because God will fight for me. I just need to hold my peace. That's your lesson tonight. We're about to stop. I ended just in time, I think, according to the clock. But you got to come back tomorrow night because we've only just crossed the Red Sea. Well, I guess the sea's open. Just take my word for it. They crossed it. And then what? Then it gets exciting. Then it gets frustrating. Then it gets really interesting. Then some really wild things happen. But you know where we're heading to right now? Where we're going to next? We're going to a mountain. A cloud and a pillar of fire are leading us there. When we get to that mountain, we're going to hear the booming voice of God. And we're going to get a law. Tomorrow night, we're going to have ourselves a Pentecost. The giving of a law. And what that means for us as Christians today. Hope to see you again tomorrow night. Thank you all very much. Yeah, I'm going to do it again. Do you want to go back?
Thank you so much, Matthew, for that wonderful lesson. We're going to dismiss here in a moment. We've got refreshments out in the foyer. You want to make sure you get your drink and your cookie.